My name is Lily Anderson, and at 29 years old. The night began like any other Friday, but the instant Daniel opened the car door, I felt it. A subtle tension in the air, something I couldn't name. 2 years together, and yet, I still noticed every flicker of expression, every imperceptible shift. His jaw was tighter than usual, and his eyes, once warm and easy, now seemed sharper, almost calculating. "Hey," I said, forcing a lightness into my voice. "Ready for dinner?" He nodded. A quick motion, polite but distant. The Danielle I knew. The one who laughed easily at my terrible jokes, who would brush my hair back when it fell in my face, was slipping away, replaced by someone who seemed polished, deliberate, aware of how he appeared to the world. We drove in silence, the city lights flickering across his focused face. I tried to shake the creeping unease. It had started 6 months ago, ever since Daniel began at the marketing firm. He'd become obsessed with appearances, the right clothes, the right image, the right friends. I told myself it was just a phase, work pressures maybe, but deep down, something whispered that it was more. The restaurant was trendy, the kind of place that served miniature portions on gigantic plates meant more for Instagram than satisfaction. Daniel's female coworkers, Caitlin and Jenna, were already seated when we arrived, laughing over wine glasses. Their energy was high, self-assured, magnetic, but there was an edge to it, a subtle competitiveness that made me instantly self-conscious. As I slid into the chair opposite Daniel, I noticed the waiter approach, polite but with an intensity in his eyes. He handed me a small folded note, his hand lingering just a fraction too long. "Excuse me, ma'am," he whispered, his voice low. "I think you should read this." My fingers trembled as I opened it, glancing around to make sure no one was watching. The note read, "Hey, I recognize your boyfriend from work. Saw him last week with another woman. Thought you should know. You deserve better. Becca." I felt the air in my chest tighten, my mind spinning. Was it true? Daniel had never given me reason to doubt him, at least not seriously. And yet the ink seemed to scorch itself into my skin, the words insistent, impossible to ignore. I tried to focus on the dinner, tried to laugh when Caitlin joked about a coworker's weekend fling, but my appetite had vanished. I noticed Daniel smiling a little too perfectly, his gaze flickering toward the waitress in a way that made my stomach knot. Politeness, I told myself. Surely that was all. But then it happened, the subtle, cruel shift. I thanked the waitress for refilling our water. Daniel's lips curved, but not in warmth. "Ah, look at her being polite," he said loud enough for Caitlin and Jenna to hear. "She thinks she's cute, doesn't she?" I swallowed, confused. "I was just being polite," I said softly. Caitlin laughed, a tinkling sound that felt sharp in my ears. "At least he has good taste," she said. "She's gorgeous." Daniel's chuckle was low, almost mocking. "Too bad she's out of your league," he added casually, as if the remark was nothing. Everyone laughed. I sat frozen, fork halfway to my mouth. This wasn't just teasing, it was calculated. Public humiliation wrapped in humor. My internal monologue screamed, "What's happening to us?" Then came the words I'd been dreading. "Seriously, you were checking her out," Daniel said, leaning closer with mock intensity. "Not that I blame you. Must be nice to dream, right?" I froze. Not true. Absolutely not. But Daniel's grin widened. "Sure you weren't," he said. "Honestly, even if you were, it's not like she'd notice. When's the last time anyone flirted with you? Besides me, of course. That was more like charity work." The words hit harder than I expected. Charity work. My entire existence, reduced to something to tolerate, something beneath him. My chest ached, my throat tight. The waiter's note trembled in my bag, its message now merging with Daniel's verbal blows. I barely noticed when the check arrived. The waitress leaned slightly across the table, a faint, knowing smile touching her lips. Something kind, almost sympathetic, but enough to make my heart twist in confusion. We left the restaurant, the city air crisp against my heated skin. Daniel's phone vibrated constantly as he chatted with his friends about trivial office drama. I reached into my bag and pulled out the note. "Daniel," I said softly, my voice trembling, "I need to show you this." He glanced at it, then scoffed. "Seriously? What is it?" I unfolded the paper with shaking hands. His eyes flicked to the words, and for the first time I saw the fraction of discomfort, the hesitation he didn't want to admit. But it was fleeting. He straightened, masking it with arrogance. "Is this some kind of joke?" he asked. "You really believe some random waitress over me?" My internal monologue screamed, "Why is he so calm? Why is he turning it on me?" I felt anger, betrayal, heartbreak, all at once. "Daniel," I said, my voice firmer now. "I don't know if it's true, but I can't ignore this." He leaned back, a dismissive shrug, the charming Daniel I once knew completely gone. "Julia, come on. Seriously? You're jealous. Nobody flirts with you. You're imagining things." I stared at him, really looked at him. The man I loved, the one who used to see me, now gaslighting me in broad daylight. A cold realization settled in my chest. This was not the man I thought I knew. I folded the note back into my bag. My hands were shaking. The city lights blurred around me, reflections on wet pavement merging with my swirling emotions. Something had changed irreversibly. The warmth, the laughter, the comfort, they were gone. And yet, the night was far from over. This was only the beginning, the first ripple in a wave that would test everything I believed about love, trust, and myself. I couldn't sleep that night. The note burned in my mind, Daniel's words replaying like a cruel echo. "You're imagining things. Nobody flirts with you." Each syllable was a dagger, twisting inside me. I loved him. I trusted him. And yet, doubt gnawed at every corner of my heart. By Saturday morning, I knew I had to confront him. Not in the car, not in public, not with witnesses. I needed him alone. When he arrived at my apartment, Daniel seemed unaffected, casually scrolling through his phone as though the world hadn't shifted under my feet. His smile was there, polite, rehearsed, like a mask. "Julia," he said, glancing up briefly. "Morning. Everything okay?" "Daniel, we need to talk," I said, my voice firm, but my stomach a chaotic mess. "It's about us." He raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. "Us? About what? Did I do something? Or are we finally getting into one of your dramatic moods?" The edge in his voice, the dismissive tone, it was familiar, but tonight it tasted like betrayal. I swallowed hard. "It's about last night, about the note I got, and your behavior at dinner." His eyes flickered for a fraction of a second, the only hint that he had noticed something. Then he leaned back, smirking. "Oh, that? Julia, seriously, you're imagining things again. You saw a note from some random waitress, and suddenly I'm the villain?" I felt heat rise to my cheeks, my hands balling into fists. "Daniel, that note said you were with a coworker, that someone saw you last week at her apartment." He laughed. It wasn't a kind laugh. It was sharp, condescending. "You really think I'd cheat on you? Honestly, Julia, nobody flirts with you. You're so quick to doubt because it's easier than admitting you're insecure." My chest tightened. In that moment, I realized this wasn't about the note. It was about him. The Daniel I thought I knew, the man who loved me, who adored my quirks and celebrated my achievements, was gone. And in his place was someone cruel, polished, calculating. I forced myself to keep my voice steady. "You mocked me at dinner, in front of your friends, in front of strangers. You turned me into a joke." Daniel's expression softened, not with remorse, but with amusement. "Julia, come on. I was teasing. You're too sensitive. Look at yourself, constantly worrying about what I'm doing, what I'm seeing. Nobody's perfect, you know?" "Teasing?" I echoed, disbelief sharp as glass. "You called me charity work. You said nobody flirts with me. You said I was out of everyone's league, except you, in a way that made it sound like you were pitying me. That's not teasing, Daniel. That's humiliation." He leaned forward, eyes narrowing just slightly. "Julia, you're twisting this. I was joking. You need to stop overreacting." I shook my head, feeling tears threaten to spill. "No. I'm done pretending it's just a joke. Last night wasn't just a joke. You've changed, and I don't know if I even know who you are anymore." For a moment, his mask faltered, a micro-expression, an almost imperceptible twitch around his eyes. But it passed, replaced by that cold, arrogant Daniel I was beginning to fear was permanent. "You're overthinking everything," he said finally, standing to leave. "You always have. Maybe that's why this relationship is complicated for you." I watched him move toward the door, disbelief and fury warring in my chest. My hands trembled as I gathered the courage to speak. "Daniel, wait, I want to see your phone. All of it. I need to know the truth. I can't do this blindfolded." He laughed again, slow, patronizing. "You want to see my phone? Really? Julia, that's absurd. Trust me, you don't need to see anything. You're imagining things. You're being paranoid." Paranoid. That word landed like a hammer. My heart raced, my vision narrowed. I realized he was gaslighting me, turning my instincts, my intuition against me, making me doubt myself. And yet, deep down, a small, insistent voice whispered, "He's hiding something. You know it." I forced myself to breathe. "Daniel, I love you. I've loved you for 2 years. But if I can't trust you, if you keep dismissing my feelings, belittling me, I can't do this anymore." He stopped in the doorway, hand on the knob, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "Julia, you're dramatic. But fine, if that's how you feel, maybe you should take some time to think." I swallowed past the lump in my throat. "No, I've already thought, and I've made my choice." The tension in the room was suffocating. My chest heaved with the weight of heartbreak, betrayal, and anger. For the first time, I felt a strange clarity. The man I loved, no, the man I thought I loved, was gone, and the choice was mine, to let him control me or to reclaim myself. He opened the door and walked out. The click of the latch echoed in the empty apartment like a final punctuation. I sank onto the couch, the note still clutched in my hand. My eyes blurred with tears I refused to shed. This is just the beginning, I thought. I need proof. I need to know for sure, and I won't stop until I do. The night stretched on, silence filling the apartment, punctuated only by the occasional vibration of my phone. Daniel's messages were unread, his calls ignored. My mind replayed every dinner, every laugh, every subtle twist of his words. And one thought crystallized with terrifying clarity. The man I trusted, the man I thought loved me, might never have been truly mine. I folded the note carefully and placed it in my bag. Tomorrow I would start looking for answers. I would dig for the truth, no matter what it cost. And somewhere deep down, beneath the fear and heartbreak, I felt a spark, a small, determined ember of courage. Sunday morning, the apartment felt unusually quiet, almost oppressive. The sunlight filtered through the blinds in thin, uneven stripes across the floor, and I couldn't shake the feeling that everything in my life had shifted. Daniel's words still echoed in my mind. "You're imagining things. You're paranoid." But the note, tucked into my bag, refused to leave me alone. I knew I couldn't just ignore it. I needed proof, or at least something concrete to reconcile my love for him with the nagging fear that had lodged itself in my chest. I started small, his social media. Daniel had always been careful, but lately I noticed subtle changes. Posts at odd hours, pictures cropped just so, comments deleted almost immediately. I traced the breadcrumbs, noticing a pattern of late-night outings he claimed were work-related. Each image, each interaction, a potential clue or a trap. Then there was the text message, a short, ambiguous string from an unknown female contact, saved under a name I didn't recognize. "Had a great time last night. Can't wait to see you again." My stomach knotted. I stared at it for a long moment, unwilling to believe what it might suggest, yet unable to ignore it. I replayed last Friday in my mind, the dinner with Daniel and his coworkers, every laugh, every sideways glance. Caitlin's laughter, so casual, yet so sharp, still echoed. Daniel's remarks had cut deeper than I realized in the moment. Charity work, out of your league. Each word now felt like a clue, a breadcrumb leading me somewhere I didn't want to go. I began methodically compiling everything I could. Screenshots, receipts, timestamps. My apartment became a map of suspicion, a visual web of evidence. Coffee cups littered the counter as I sat cross-legged on the floor, phone in one hand, notebook in the other, reconstructing dinners, outings, and conversations. The room felt both chaotic and meticulously organized, a reflection of my mind. I remembered the waitress note, the careful phrasing, the deliberate kindness in Becca's handwriting. She had risked something by warning me, and now her words felt prophetic. "You deserve better." By mid-afternoon, my nerves were frayed, my fingers trembling as I pieced together small, undeniable inconsistencies. The coworker text, the deleted Instagram posts, the vague excuses, each detail, when layered together, painted a picture too troubling to ignore. I felt a mix of fear, anger, and reluctant anticipation. What if it's true? What if I've been blind for 2 years? My mind raced with scenarios, some unbearably cruel, others almost laughably trivial in comparison to the emotional weight of reality. I decided I couldn't wait any longer. That evening, I confronted him, my evidence in hand. I needed to see his reaction, to hear his explanations, to gauge whether the Daniel I knew had ever really existed, or if he had been hiding behind a mask all along. "Daniel," I said, sliding my phone and notebook across the kitchen table, "I need you to explain this." He glanced at the materials, his expression unreadable. For a moment, a flicker of something, nervousness, guilt, passed across his features, but it was gone before I could be sure. "Julia, this is ridiculous," he said lightly, attempting casual dismissal. "You're overreacting. You're reading too much into things." "No," I said, my voice firm, rising above the tension. "I'm not imagining this. I've collected everything: texts, social media interactions, receipts, even inconsistencies in your work stories. I need to know the truth. Were you seeing someone else?" He laughed softly, shaking his head. "You really think I'd cheat on you? Julia, come on, this is insane. You're paranoid. You're twisting everything to fit a narrative." I felt the heat of anger rise in my chest. Paranoid? I've followed the trail, Daniel. Every lie, every late night, every vague excuse. You've been hiding things, and now you're trying to gaslight me? His eyes flashed for the briefest moment, and I thought I saw regret, or perhaps fear, but it vanished immediately. "Julia, you're overthinking again. I've been busy, okay? Work is stressful. You're imagining threats where there are none. You're making this about you, when it's really about your insecurities." I clenched my fists, holding back tears that threatened to spill. Insecurities? No. This is about honesty, about respect, about the Daniel I thought I knew. For the first time, the silence between us felt heavy, almost unbearable. The air seemed thick with unspoken truths, half-lies, and the weight of my growing realization. I could no longer trust him completely, not tonight, and maybe not ever. I backed away, needing space, clarity, and air. "I can't do this anymore, Daniel, not like this. Not until you prove otherwise, or until you leave." He stared at me, unreadable, and finally shook his head. "Julia, maybe we just need some time apart. You're being unreasonable." But I wasn't being unreasonable. I was being rational, cautious, brave even. I had followed the trail of doubt, and now I stood at the edge of a truth I could no longer avoid. As I retreated to my bedroom, evidence in hand, I felt a strange mix of dread and relief. Dread because I didn't know what I would discover next. Relief because for the first time, I was no longer willing to let uncertainty erode my self-respect. I lay awake that night, replaying every dinner, every flirtation, every laugh. I knew the next steps had to be careful, calculated. Investigation alone would not satisfy the growing storm in my chest. I needed confrontation, the kind that would either confirm my fears or force him to face the consequences of his actions. And somewhere beneath the turmoil, a quiet ember of resolve glimmered. I would uncover the truth no matter how painful, no matter how much it hurt. And when I did, I would decide whether the Daniel I loved ever truly existed, or whether it was time to let him go. Monday evening, the apartment felt colder than usual, though the air conditioner hadn't been on. I sat on the edge of the couch, evidence laid out on the coffee table before me, texts, screenshots, receipts, timestamps, all pointing to the cracks in Daniel's carefully curated facade. My hands trembled, but not with fear this time, trembled with determination. When Daniel walked in, he looked casual, relaxed, the same mask he always wore. But I knew better. I had pieces of the puzzle now, and I wasn't leaving the room without answers. "Daniel," I said, my voice steady, controlled, "we need to talk, now." He smiled, that infuriating, disarming smile, like nothing could touch him. "Julia, is this about the note again? We've been over this." "No, Daniel," I said, standing. "It's about you, about us, about everything I've discovered over the past few days." I laid the evidence in front of him, sliding screenshots across the table. "Explain this. Texts, social media posts, deleted messages, all the inconsistencies. Were you with her?" For a moment, he froze. Just a fraction of a second, but enough for me to see it. Hesitation. Regret? Maybe. Fear? Definitely. Then he leaned back, feigning nonchalance. "Julia, you're reading too much into things. I've told you before, it's paranoia. You're imagining betrayal where there isn't any." I felt heat rise to my cheeks, a mix of fury and heartbreak. "Paranoia? Daniel, don't gaslight me. I have proof. I've traced everything. I've reconstructed your lies. Don't turn this around on me." His smirk faltered. Just slightly. Then he laughed, low and condescending. Proof. Julia. Even if you think you have proof, it's circumstantial. You're blowing this out of proportion. I stepped closer, voice rising. No, Daniel, I have evidence. I know what you've been doing. I trusted you, loved you, and you lied, humiliated me, and dismissed my feelings. That's not just circumstantial. That's betrayal. The room went silent, the air heavy with tension. For the first time, he couldn't find the words, couldn't charm his way out. His eyes darted, searching, calculating, and I realized the Daniel I loved, the warm, attentive, protective man, was gone. And what remained was someone I no longer recognized. I took a deep breath, letting the weight of my decision settle in. I can't do this anymore, Daniel. I won't be treated like this. I deserve respect. I deserve honesty. And you need to face the consequences of your actions. He opened his mouth to speak, but I cut him off. No, not this time. There's nothing left to say. You've had your chance. I turned and walked to my bedroom, gathering my courage. When I returned, Daniel was still standing there, frozen, as if he expected me to beg or hesitate. But I didn't. I packed the few belongings he had left at my place, clothes, a coffee mug he never used, remnants of a life I had shared with someone I barely knew anymore. I placed them in boxes by the door. You're done here, I said, calm but resolute. Take your things, leave, and don't come back. He glanced at the boxes, his face pale, a flicker of anger, or maybe disbelief crossing his features. Julia, this is ridiculous. You're overreacting. No, I said, my voice steady, unwavering. I'm reclaiming myself. He left without another word, the click of the door echoing like a release. Silence enveloped me, heavy but cleansing. The weight of betrayal still lingered, but beneath it, I felt something I hadn't in weeks. Control, agency, the first taste of freedom. Days passed. I kept busy, rediscovering myself outside of his shadow. Work became a refuge, a reminder that I had value beyond what anyone else thought. Friends who had noticed the tension came around, their support grounding me. Slowly, the ache of heartbreak softened, replaced by clarity and resolve. And then, unexpectedly, someone appeared. Becca, the waitress from that first night, sent me a message. Not flirtatious, not pitying, but kind, grounded, and genuine. She had noticed my struggle and offered friendship, understanding, and a connection built on honesty rather than appearances. We met for coffee, simple and casual. Conversation flowed naturally, easy and unforced. She laughed at my jokes, listened to my stories about work, and didn't judge when I spoke about my doubts and heartbreak. For the first time in weeks, I felt safe being myself. Over the next few weeks, our friendship deepened. She wasn't a replacement for the Daniel I lost, but she was a reminder that not everyone would manipulate or betray me. She saw me, truly saw me. And as for Daniel, social media told me everything I needed to know. He had moved on, publicly flaunting a new relationship with someone else, oblivious or indifferent to the consequences of his actions. Caitlin even reached out to apologize for laughing that night at dinner, confirming that karma, in small but satisfying ways, has a way of catching up. I framed the note from that night, the one that had sparked this storm of emotions. It sat on my desk, a reminder that even in the darkest, most confusing nights, clarity and justice can emerge. That sometimes betrayal is a catalyst, not a defeat. I poured myself another cup of coffee, settling into the couch. Becca sat across from me, chatting about her day at nursing school, her rescue cat, and the small triumphs that made life worth living. And I realized the worst nights sometimes lead to the best mornings. I smiled, feeling a strange lightness, a sense of hope I hadn't felt in months. The past was behind me. The future, uncertain but promising, stretched out before me. And this time I knew I could face it, strong, whole, and unbroken.